Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday. We have a great show for everyone today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We have all the latest of the fallout and details from President Biden's trip to Israel. We also have some additional information, which you can do with whatever you want, about what happened with that hospital in Gaza. So we'll break that down for you. We also have new questions about how quickly humanitarian aid could move into Gaza after President Biden says that he was able to strike a deal with Netanyahu. So we'll give you those details. We also have some new details about how the White House is planning on dealing with trying to get Ukraine aid and Israel aid and border funding and Gaza humanitarian assistance through Congress. Of course, right now there is no Speaker of the House. So we are actually going to bring in Emily and Kyle to talk about some domestic politics, both in terms of the speaker situation, new poll, very interesting with regards to RFK and who he hurts more in terms of the general election, some details about Cornel West campaign, and excited to bring you the last of our results from that focus group down in Atlanta with Democratic-based voters.
Yes, that's right. And just thank you to everybody who's been taking advantage. We do have a focus group special going on right now. Everybody's been helping support our show. I know it's been a lot of work on all of our staff's behalf, not only the focus group, but keeping up with the day-to-day grind of Israel-Palestine. So we appreciate everybody for your support and all of that. It does certainly mean a lot. With that, let's go ahead and get to the, as you said, fallout really from the trip. President Biden going on the ground in Israel after the cancellation of his follow-on Arab summit in Jordan, having to turn around and come back. He made these comments while he was on the ground. Let's take a listen to what he said.
I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone. You are not alone. As long as the United States stands, and we will stand forever, we'll not let you ever be alone. We've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. Though for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives.
So that was an interesting, that was basically a mashup that our team did there. The major takeaway from the U.S. was Israel does not stand alone. The United States is behind you. But a slight note of caution, describing it, though, as 15 times 9/11, he's also like, also maybe exercise a little bit of restraint. He would certainly know, having participated in much of the war beating for up to Iraq. But this also really, what those comments came is after critical meetings, not only with Benjamin Netanyahu, but with the Israeli war cabinet. And in that war cabinet, we are learning more details from Israeli media about what Biden promised them. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Again, this is from the Times of Israel military reporter. He says, quote, "The new Biden administration has privately been urging Israel not to launch a military campaign against Hezbollah. Washington is working to keep the current war from spreading beyond Gaza. The U.S. recognizes Israel must respond to the increased targeting of its northern border Hezbollah since the October 7 onslaught, but repeated attacks by the Lebanese terror group, and fact that Israel failed to anticipate this assault, have led to the intensification of discussions about whether Israel must be the one to initiate a battle in order to maintain the upper hand." Let's go to the next one, because this is where things get very, very complicated for America. Such talk has been a cause of concern for the U.S., which is privately warning Hezbollah and Iran not to open a war on the northern front. The U.S. has cautioned Israel to be careful in its military responses, but here is the critical tweet. Biden officials have indicated to Israel in recent days, if Hezbollah initiates a war against Israel, the United States military will join the IDF in fighting the terror group. Let's go to the next one, please. The Pentagon has already dispatched a pair of aircraft carrier strike groups to the eastern Mediterranean near the Israeli border in order to deter Israeli and American adversaries in the region. Hezbollah has already fired dozens of anti-tank guided missiles, rockets, and mortars into Israeli positions. So this actually demonstrates, Krystal, that behind the scenes, President Biden did give a guarantee, or at least rhetorical assurance, that should Hezbollah officially enter this war, that the United States will back them. So originally it was talked about deterrence, this carrier strike group. But we have 2,000 United States Marines, which are on their way already to the region. I mean, certainly it's not like they've given us yet an indication of ground troops. But, I mean, this is a significant military declaration on behalf of the president. I can't help but think nobody in Congress ever voted for this, just so we're all aware. You know, it's not like the 2001 AUMF can cover Hezbollah, although I'm sure the White House lawyers will try. But it just again, though, underscores that President Biden's visit was not just to try and, quote-unquote, tamp down tensions or to give assurances. There were also military talks happening behind the scenes, which absolutely, and something we've tried to underscore here from the beginning, could embroil and bring the United States into this war at a very, very immediate direction.
Something Emily and I covered yesterday is this report in Axios suggesting that these discussions had taken place within the U.S. Government context. And one of the things they laid out in Axios is the legal justification that they would use to get involved in these hostilities with Americans without having to go to the American people, let alone go through Congress. What they say is that under commonly held understandings of Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the president can enter U.S. forces into hostilities to protect Americans abroad. So they would use the fact that there are Americans in Israel who could potentially be in danger to justify us getting involved. This expert added that if Biden were to make that decision, he'd need to notify Congress within 48 hours under the War Powers Resolution of 1973. That would give Biden 60 days to act before Congress's approval to use military force would be required. And we, of course, have seen many times presidents use authorities without going to Congress whatsoever and getting us involved in various conflagrations abroad. So this is a very, very real possibility, especially as we look, you know, in the wake of that horrific hospital carnage, and you see the protests and anger erupting in cities across the region. You see protests outside of U.S. embassies, Israeli embassies. You see Palestinians clashing with police in the West Bank. So the level of anger and outrage throughout the region is incredibly heightened, which puts a lot of pressure on Hezbollah to do more. So far, they've sort of calculated, like, we can do just enough to signal our solidarity without this going into a broader escalation. But there is a huge, huge risk here. And the fact that the U.S. is explicitly telling the Netanyahu government, if we go there, we will have your back, we will involve our military, is incredibly consequential.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, though, because, you know, I mean, they've killed 5 IDF soldiers, not nothing. Imagine if somebody killed 5 U.S. soldiers, you know, that certainly would invite a response.
That's right.
They have used, and I can't emphasize this enough, Hezbollah is not Hamas. It is not Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These people have serious weapons. They brought it to the IDF hardcore in 2006. They've only gotten better since then. They have fought sustained military campaigns throughout Syria. These are battle-hardened, trusted veterans, and they have, you know, the recruiting pipeline. Dream, if the United States were to get them involved, they would have certainly population that would back them if there were to seem like an external Western power, not just Israel, that were to do that. But the real danger in all this is that it goes up the escalation chain, because Hezbollah, of course, is controlled, or at least, you know, in some way by Tehran. IRGC forces almost certainly would be involved. So then, you know, Iranians could be getting killed if America is. And then you just keep going, you know, up the ladder of then Tehran thinks they have to get involved. And already, you know, the very day of the attack, there were already calls for the United States to get involved. Now, imagine if a Hezbollah rocket or something like that falls on a U.S. base, or it goes after and hits some American soldiers, or they use, you know, I mean, look at the Houthis. They were able to fire things against U.S. ships. It's not like it is outside of the capability of these militias to inflict damage. And also, we focus now on what the U.S. has told Israel. Let's also focus on what Israel has told the U.S. about what the forthcoming operations in Gaza could look like, which almost certainly fall on the backdrop of how the Arab world itself is going to respond, specifically Hezbollah. Let's put this up there on the screen. This was a report from Barak Ravid. He is an Israeli reporter here in Washington. He works for Axios. He actually put this out in Hebrew, so we are reading the rough translation by Google, but it's been confirmed. This is just the gist of it. He says, U.S. President Joe Biden has said during his meeting with the members of the War Cabinet that he understands the operation in Gaza will be protracted and will take time, according to a senior Israeli Israeli official who is aware of the contents of the meeting. Let's go to the next one, please. He says senior Israeli officials have stated that Prime Minister Netanyahu, the defense minister, and the minister have told Biden that the move to dismantle Hamas and change the reality in Gaza will be lengthy. Quote, it could take years. Go to the next one, please. And says Gallant has said that the operation in Gaza will be long and difficult. Israel will need American political support and security assistance for a long period of time. And then finally, he says Biden told the members of the war cabinet it is important to respond to the humanitarian needs in Gaza in order to preserve the international support that currently exists for the IDF operation. So this is where I also think that we need to spend some time thinking about the geopolitics. The hospital situation, we're going to talk a little bit about, what happened with the hospital, all of that, in terms of what exactly, who was responsible for the explosion. Okay, in the immediate aftermath, though, regardless of how the Western media or anybody would have reported it, here's the truth. No matter what the New York Times or the BBC said, people in the Arab world were going to protest anyway, Krystal. They are primed to believe that this is something that Israel would do because they have done something and stuff like that in the past. They are also primed not to believe the West and to disregard anything that we say. They also are getting instantaneous updates. I don't think people really comprehend how much of the Arab world is both on Twitter and gets all of their news on WhatsApp, which is forwarded to them by their friends. It only takes one tweet in order to spark something like this. This was just 500 people, and I'm not diminishing the death, and also we don't even yet know if the 500 number is real. But this was a claim of 500 people for a single hospital. Now imagine a full-fledged, years-long, according to the Israelis, urban combat situation with tens of thousands of civilian deaths over the course of a year. The hospital is happening every day with combined armed tactics. Israelis did this. Palestinians did this. Nobody knows in the immediate aftermath. All we do know is videos coming out of carnage, blood, and dead bodies all over the street. There is simply no way that the situation will be contained to Gaza. That was one incident, one alleged airstrike and or misfired rocket. This is actual combat on the ground that will just go on forever. And, as we all saw in Ukraine, I mean, the blood and the carnage of what modern urban combat looks like is horrific. Luckily, most people did not pay much attention to that, at least, outside of the news for what was happening inside of Ukraine. It didn't have the same level of emotional resonance. But for the global Islamic population of 2 million, this is a highly emotional issue, and they are not going to forget. In the very same way that many American Jews and Israelis will never forget the carnage as well. I'm not even morally equivocating it. I'm only saying that if you think that they will sit by and just watch this happen, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
And so we have to consider that. We have to consider what the future is going to look like if we want stability.
Horrific carnage. I mean, you already have very high civilian death rate. You already have, over 1,000 children in Gaza. And those images will be playing on a loop on social media and on regional televisions, for years to come. Let's also think about from a U.S. perspective, and we're already embroiled in this proxy war in Ukraine. Now we're going to be embroiled, even if we don't get directly involved, which is a big if, we're now going to be embroiled in a second multi-year indefinite proxy war. I want to go back to some of what Biden was saying there, warning, very gently warning about the lessons of 9/11, and make sure you understand what your objectives are, and make sure you understand that if what you're doing right now is actually leading to the accomplishment of those objectives. And we're about to talk a little bit more of that in a moment. But it's already clear that those lessons have not been learned. I mean, it's already clear. The Israeli government has admitted they have no plan for the day after. If they actually want to, go in and root out Hamas, which is an absolutely worthy and legitimate goal, just bombing the hell out of a mostly civilian population is not going to accomplish that goal. It's certainly not going to win you the trust of any locals to help you be able to decipher and figure out who is part of the Hamas terrorist organization, who is just an innocent civilian. So you can already see the lessons of 9/11 have not been learned here and are not being heeded, and no little gentle warning from the American president, who has already said, we're going to do whatever you need for years to come to whatever extent that you need. None of that is going to be listened to whatsoever. And I just have to say, on a side note, the like 9/11 math thing really irritates the hell out of me, because I understand why they say they want to impress upon people like how devastating and how horrific this attack was, which I think anybody who is looking at what happened here can fully understand and acknowledge. But there's such a weird desire to make some sort of math equation to analogize it to 9/11. And it's like, can't we just acknowledge that, like, these lives were lost and they were precious, and that matters a lot, without doing some sort of weird 9/11 math, which, by the way, is never applied on the Palestinian side of like, well, this is an even smaller population. Look how many lives are there. Then this is like 70 9/11. It's just, it's, to me, something about it really irritates me and sort of indicates that certain lives mean a lot more than other lives.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this previously. The only reason why it's useful is just to emphasize that it's a small country, which means that somebody knows somebody who was impacted by the attack. I personally think you could just leave the weird math out of that, because, you know, by that standard, it's like every car accident in Israel would be magnified higher.
Right.
It's like, no, it's like, look, human life is equal. Yes, it's a catastrophe. We can intellectually understand that in a smaller country it will hit harder than in a larger country, although I'm still not even entirely sure that that is true. If you
More
factor
people will
in,
have a direct connection to it within that country.
Right, but I mean, I could argue it the other way, which is that this is a country which has been at war since its foundation and has, you know, sustained and has baked into it the idea of military service, and so maybe they would emotionally see, like, there's no point in trying to do all of these games. It's just like 1,400 people were viciously and horrifically killed by Hamas terrorists. Leave it at that. And I actually think emotively we can all empathize with that, because we also went through it, something similar on 9/11. If you factor it out more, I mean, I think everybody knows somebody who served in Iraq or Afghanistan, or knows somebody who did.
Absolutely.
And I think we can all just, you know, empathize, and having seen that person with a little bit of the light, you know, fade out of their eyes over time, or they just changed a little bit after they came over from there. So let's just try and, you know, bring it back to relating to people on a human level, and then how we all process collectively the trauma that we also went through post 9/11, not just from the attack, but from the wars that we engaged in.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.